Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. So in this video, I'll be answering questions that you guys have been asking just in general in the comments and other videos, and also from the video that you guys have commented on. I want to say, first of all, thank you for taking the time to write to me, to comment all those questions. I've had a really good time going through them all and just trying to condense them. I'm going to try to answer as many as I can, but I don't want this to be a 40-minute video, so I'm going to try to keep it interesting. My aim is for about 10 minutes, but I've got a feeling it's going to go over. In which case, I will have in the description box under this video the questions that I'm answering and the time. So I might be answering, fondant work at 10 minutes and 15 seconds, or it might be 5 minutes, whatever it is, I'll have that in the description box, and that way we can just skip straight ahead to whatever it is you'd really like to know. So let's get started. The very first question and the most common question that I got throughout the list was, how did you start? Are you self-taught or did you go to culinary school? So I didn't go to school, I haven't taken classes. I started in 2013. So I was 21 at the time. My sister bought me really cool decorating tools because I've always been into baking. Baking is just something that I grew up with because Dad's a chef. My nonna is extremely talented with baking herself. And just gonna grow with it, I think. And anyway, she bought me these tools, and they were the fondant decorating tools. So you got the pack of 6 where it comes with the ball tool and the scalpel tool. I thought to myself, all right, cool, I'm gonna use these, gonna make some flowers. Made some gum paste flowers, looked up how to make it on the internet, that is. And then I figured, you know what, these should probably go on a cake. Looked up how to make a cake, made a cake, decorated it, got a really good response. So I was like, I'm gonna make some more. And eventually you just, ooh, where's my microphone? You just keep making cakes, and you practice every day, and it's a lot of fun. So I started off that way. I taught myself through Googling information. I think my biggest resource would have to be Cake Central. Cake Central is amazing. It's a forum for cake decorators. Whatever question you might have, type it in, and usually there's a thread of all these people who've had the same problem, and they get others responding on how they might have tackled the issue or how they might go about doing it. They usually leave links to like pictorials or video tutorials, and it was such an amazing resource when I was starting out. Along with that is Pinterest. Pinterest is huge as well with their pictorials. Kind of just type in cake decorating and you'll see all these different sort of techniques. And at the beginning, that's how I taught myself, just constantly practicing. Very popular question, how do you price your cakes? Now that's $1 million question. That is all dependent on how it is that you're running your little cake business. Is it a business, or is it something that you can do for yourself at home that you don't mind being paid for, as an extra income? If you're running a business, you need to charge a profit margin. So to begin with, to charge for a cake, you would need to tie in your ingredients costs. Your time is important, so depending how much you would charge for your time. If you're a beginner and you're not very confident, you might only feel comfortable charging maybe $15 to $20 an hour. If you've got a decent amount of experience on you, you might bump that up to $24 an hour. So you got your ingredients, your time, which is dependent on your expertise. And then you have your overhead costs, so your electricity, your gas, and then if you're running a small business, you have to put on that profit margin, and you might take the total that you've calculated plus maybe a 20% or 10%. And that 10% goes towards your business. So it goes towards replenishing the materials that you use. It'll go towards any marketing. So if you're advertising yourself, if you have a small business, you can't afford not to advertise. Just make sure I've included everything there. And that's how I would go about pricing a cake. So a lot of you guys have been having issues with coloring your chocolate. The best way to color your chocolate would be using either powdered color or an oil-based color. And if you do want to use gel food color, you still can. You just have to add something to it, like a flow coat by AmeriColor, which stops your chocolate from seizing. If you can't find that, I usually use Kofa. And if you can't find Kofa, the best other alternative would be just regular vegetable oil. So next question, how much time does it take to make a cake? So depending on the type of cake you're making, buttercream cakes do take less time than fondant cakes. And also depends on the complexity of the design as well. So simpler cakes will take less time. If I were to give you an estimate, anywhere between 3.5 to maybe 7 hours. But that's, again, the 7-hour mark, you're talking about like maybe the 2 to 3 tier cakes, maybe longer than 7 if it's a 3-tier cake. and with complex decorations. If you make a cake beforehand and you freeze it, you cut off a lot of time, but it just depends on your personal preference. When I do cakes videos lately, I used to bake them and then decorate them the next day, but that took up so much time. So I've been baking them in bulk and then freezing them. And that way, as I make the tutorials, they're not cakes that are going to be given to clients, so I don't mind freezing them. They taste exactly the same, to be honest. They taste really moist and nice, and you can't tell they've been frozen. That's only because you freeze them as soon as they've cooled down. If you leave the cakes on your countertop for a couple of days and then you freeze them, they'll still lose the freshness from that couple of days that you left them out. So I would freeze them straight away after you've baked them. But yeah, so I've been freezing them, and they take up a lot less time when decorating your cake if you were to freeze it. So to decorate a cake for a tutorial, it takes me, with filming though, it takes me anywhere from about 5 to 7 hours. Edit the video and then do the voiceover and everything else, take the photographs and stuff. It takes me about another hour and a half. So on average, it's about 8 hours. So it's like working day. But to cut down on that time, I try to make more than one video a day. And that way in 9 to 10 hours, I can at least make 2 videos instead of 1. So how old am I? And a little bit about myself. I'm 24 years old, soon to be 25 in February. I turned 25 February 6th, but if I could stay 24, that would be fantastic. This is like the perfect age. I started baking when I was, baking when I was in high school. I was about maybe 15, and I would make so many cupcakes. I used to be obsessed with cupcakes. I'd have like legit, I think 72 cupcakes was the most I baked in one day, and then I had to give them all away at school because like, so soothing. It's a really weird thing. I just love baking. So what other hobbies do I have outside of cake decorating? I basically love anything that's sort of artsy. I love photography. Photography is my second love. Before cake decorating, I used to be huge on scrapbooking and card making. Aside from that, I don't really have any other hobbies. My life pretty much revolves around the cakes. And I also love traveling. Traveling is a big thing. I've got most of my family down in Italy, so it's a great excuse to just kind of skip the country, go down, spend some quality time with them. So which YouTubers inspired me to start baking and start a channel? My favorite YouTubers are Chef John from foodwishes.com. He's amazing, amazingly funny and really engaging. He's the kind of guy that you'd watch every video, even if you know you're never going to make it, even if you know you hate prawns, you'll watch that video because he's just really entertaining. Laura Vitale from Laura in the Kitchen is also extremely talented, very engaging as well. Gemma Stafford from Bigger Bolder Baking, she does some marvelous work there as well. In terms of cake decorating, I didn't really have a specific one. If I had to name one, I would have to say How to Cook That. She was really, really fun to watch, and she had a couple of cake decorating videos, which was great. But you kind of type it in and you click on random videos, but you don't really kind of stick to one creator. You just go through all the videos when you're learning. So I couldn't really put a name to who exactly inspired me to do cake decorating. It was all over the place. I've had a lot of questions on how to make a 3-tier cake for beginners. So one of the questions was, what kind of cakes would you use in a 3-tier cake? So your sponge cakes or your softer cakes, the cakes that aren't very stable, you wouldn't really make a tiered cake out of those. And if you did need them on a tiered cake, you'd make sure they're the top cake where they don't have any pressure on them at all. You'd use a mud cake for the bottom if you could, the really dense, really strong cakes that can last days. So mud cakes in general you need to age anyway because when you bake them, you keep them at room temperature and they become moist, they become denser and more flavoursome over time. So you might leave them maybe for 1 to 2 days before you actually decorate them. And they're super sturdy. So mud cakes is definitely something you'd use in a 3-tier cake, preferably at the bottom. They're also heavier cakes, so that's why you want them at the bottom. If you had maybe a butter cake, which is also great for stacking, the butter cake you wouldn't put at the bottom with a mud cake on top because mud cakes are still heavier. So you got to take that into account, how heavy it is, how sturdy it is. So given the whole weight issue, you should also consider your frosting. If you have a very soft frosting in your mud cakes, and the weight pushes down, that frosting is going to seep out to the sides. So you'll want something sturdier like a chocolate ganache. Once that sets, it sets pretty firmly. Buttercream as well would set pretty firmly too. If you had things like custard fillings or like a lemon curd and all that jazz, then you'll want those to be either at the middle or the top tier. So it's a little bit to consider. When you're using dowels as well to stack your cakes, which you always need to use dowels if you're stacking cakes, you would use sturdier dowels at the bottom tier because that's going to take up all the weight. You'll want a lot more of them in the bottom cake. So I'm talking maybe at least 7 or 9. I usually like a diamond formation of 3 because I only ever stack small cakes. So at the very bottom tier, you'll want something out of wood or the PVC sort of material pipes for the food safe type of PVC to go in the bottom. At the middle tier, then you can sort of get away with your wood and your straws. And then for the very top tier, you could just use straws like I've been doing in all my other tutorials. When traveling with your 3-tier cakes, if you can, if you're confident enough, try to assemble them at the venue. If you need to transport them and you can't stack them at the venue and you have to get it done at home, then I would put them in a box, a very tall box that's taller than the cake or at least as tall as the cake. Make sure the lid's on top, and the boxes generally tend to secure it. If it's the same size as a board, it makes sure that it doesn't move around. And with the box, you can put a seatbelt over it and secure it in your car. My favorite cakes to make are your buttercream cakes. I love working with fondant as well, but lately I've really been getting into all the different things that you can do with buttercream. So coloring the different buttercream, adding multicolored layers, the piping. Piping is so much fun. Making buttercream flowers, things like that. They're a lot less time consuming than fondant work as well, which is why I like it. I've tasted Swiss meringue buttercream, but I'm not a fan because of the whole raw egg thing. I can't handle raw egg. If my nonna or someone makes a tiramisu, my first question is there egg in it? They'll usually lie to me, and I'll eat it anyway, but that's not the point. I really don't like raw egg, so I tend to kind of gravitate towards the American buttercream. But otherwise, I really like ganache as well. I just don't work as often with ganache purely for the time. If you have to make the ganache, you have to wait for it to cool down and firm up. That usually takes like overnight, and I don't have that kind of patience because I want to get things done straight away. But preferably for the taste and even for the stability, I'd probably prefer ganache if it didn't take so long. How do you keep your cakes moist? So first of all, there's the sugar syrup way, where you make a sugar syrup which is just equal parts of water to sugar, and then you add in a flavoring like vanilla extract or a liquor. If I add in a liquor, I usually go for the cherry brandy, but that depends on the taste of your cake. Make sure that the two flavors complement each other. And so what a sugar syrup does is that it retains the moisture. It also keeps your cake fresher for longer, as it works as like a preservative. Second option would be when you're baking the cake. So lately I've been using foil over the top of my cake tins. I'll put in the cake batter about 3/4 of the way up the cake tin, and then I'll cover it in foil. I'll bake it off, and then when it's ready, I leave it on my countertop to cool down in the cake tin for about 5 to 10 minutes, and I don't take off the foil. You'll notice that when you take off the foil, there's a lot of moisture on the foil, and so that kind of catches all the moisture, and then it goes back into the cake. So as it's sort of cooling, it's not losing that moisture to the air. Alternatively, what you can do is do the same with the foil, bake it with the foil. Take the foil off as soon as the cake comes out of the oven, but then turn your cake tin upside down because the moisture will rise. And so if it's upside down, the moisture rises back into the cake. And there's another way that you can kind of trap moisture and keep your cake nice and soft. On the topic of keeping cakes fresh, I had a lot of people asking if I freeze my cakes. So for the tutorials I usually freeze them. And to freeze them after they've baked, I'll let them cool down completely and then Glad wrap them or wrap them in plastic wrap very airtight. So I'll do like 4 layers. And then if you have a airtight container that's big enough, put it into your airtight container and then into your freezer. Or even easier, if you have a giant Ziploc bag, still use a Glad wrap, could probably only use 2 layers instead of 4. Put it into your Ziploc bag and that'll retain airtightness as well and keep it fresh. If you are going to freeze it, I usually don't like to use it for after longer than a month, but they can last a lot longer in the freezer. But just a month is probably my mark when I say, maybe it's time to get rid of you, kind of thing. This question is really good. What advice would you give people starting off a small business in cake decorating? So first of all, when you're starting off cake decorating, practice makes perfect. I can't stress that enough. Keep practicing. Even when you think you've gotten good at something, make yourself a pro at it. Just keep working at it. When you start making cakes, make them for friends and family. Obviously, I think that's probably what you would do anyway, because they're the people who are likely going to give you good feedback, but by good I mean honest feedback, so it'll be critical feedback, constructive criticism. And then when you get more confident and your cakes are getting better, that's when you might start selling your cakes to the public. Now, when you're selling cakes to the public, be patient. Business doesn't come straight away. It could take up to months and months before you start really getting some consistent orders. Don't lose hope. It will take a while. And the best thing you could do is advertise. In a business, you can't afford not to advertise. So you really need to try to get the word out there. If you're using flyers in people's letterboxes, for example, now with the invention of social media, it's really not that hard to advertise at a very low cost as well. So what kind of beginner's tools would I recommend? To start cake decorating, I think the essentials would have to be a turntable, a serrated knife, a spatula, a bench scraper. It's definitely a good one. Disposable piping bags, or you could grab one that you wash, but if you can't be bothered washing, just grab the disposable ones. A couple of star tips are really useful, just when you're really basically starting out. And fondant as well, if you want to start working around, playing around with some fondant. It's really good fun at the beginner stage. What kind of fondant would you use? I think Orchid. I keep saying orchid, but it's pronounced orchard. Orchard's really good, and it's sold at Safeway and Coles here in Australia. Lately, I've been using Bakals. I think it's pronounced Bakals fondant, and I think it's an Australian brand as well, but I think you should be able to get it overseas too. It kind of reminds me of gum paste. It's very sturdy fondant, it's super flexible, and it's ridiculously easy to work with. So a lot of you guys have been having problems with your climate. Either you have a very humid climate or a very dry climate, and it's affecting your fondant. If you have a very dry climate and you're getting a lot of cracks, a lot of elephant skin with your fondant, it's drying out, I would recommend not to use cornstarch as a non-sticking agent. I would try to go for maybe like a shortening. Adding shortening into your fondant and kneading it through your fondant is really good as well, because it gives it a bit more moisture and it makes it a lot smoother, makes it more flexible. So shortening would help out with that too. Working very quickly with your fondant as well would help. So if you're going to roll it out, make sure you have your cake on the side ready to be covered, so that as soon as you finish rolling it out, you can just pick it up, lay it over your cake, and just work with it straight away. Try not to roll your fondant out too thin, because the thinner your fondant is, the quicker it'll dry out. So if you can leave it maybe 4 millimeters instead of rolling it out to 2 millimeters, depending whether or not it will affect the design of your cake. And for those of you living in humid conditions where your fondant is very soft and a bit sticky, then I would recommend using a little bit of cornstarch as a non-sticking kind of agent on your surface. What helps as well is to put your fondant in the fridge. Cover it in Glad wrap, that way it doesn't absorb the moisture from the fridge, but when you do put it in the fridge, it firms up a little bit, so you'll be able to work with it a lot easier than if it was really loose and sticky. And I think the best way to really try to control for those problems is also to keep your climate at a stable condition. So if your outside temperature is really, really warm, then you might want to invest in an air conditioner, a dehumidifier in your house, just something to keep it at a temperature that's great for fondant work. It might be an expensive alternative, but if you already have an air conditioner in your house, then I would make use of it on those really hot days. There's ways around it anyway, but to control your environment would probably be one of the better ways to try to control your fondant problems. What did you do before cake decorating? So before cake decorating, I was a student in psychology. I finished my degree in psychology, went into my Masters of Counselling halfway through, and I kind of found my passion and realised, well, actually, probably don't want to do counselling for the rest of my life. I enjoyed this way too much. So then cake decorating became my focus and counselling became my fallback plan. And this is actually what I really, really want to do. Cake decorating. My dream, I have a couple of dreams. My dream is to start up a cake shop eventually down the road. I would love, love, love to be an instructor of cake decorating. To be a teacher, to run classes would be amazing. And to have my own little line of cake decorating kind of creative stuff, like the stencils and the cake toppers and the silicone molds, just making all those, designing them and making them, that would be awesome. What do I do with my cakes? So after I finished a video tutorial, I'll usually give it away. I'll advertise it up on Facebook, my personal Facebook page. I'll be like, hey guys, just made this cake, just wondering if anyone will take it off my hands for X amount. And if after a day I don't get any buyers, then I'll just give it to my brother's friends or see who else is interested. Otherwise, it just stays in my fridge and 5 days later I have to throw it out anyway. So, and one thing that I forgot to mention, I do work at a bakery. I do sell my own cakes from home. The bakery, I've been working there for about 4 months now. That's such good fun. And it's great because I've been taking on a lot of extra kind of learning new skills, being able to practice skills that I wasn't too confident about, and it's been really, really good. But yes, thanks guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this questions and answers video. I definitely had a great time making it. It was really interesting to see all the questions you guys had, what you were kind of curious about, interested in. And I will catch you next time. Thanks for watching.